I worked in the yard a lot because, and it might sound crazy, but it helped me clear my mind of all the ugliness of people and of the world. And I made up my mind at the very beginning, that you can't win them all, and by that I meant you can't solve them all. It didn't mean that you don't try. You can't make yourself crazy trying to solve things and do it the wrong way. And so you got to get out and plant a few flowers. We had a deputy chief over crimes against persons. I don't know how it got in the news media, because I know we didn't say it, but some kind of way it got in print media that homicide detectives were baffled over this homicide. And our deputy chief came unglued. He came unglued, and he came down the hall, and he said he better not ever hear again that his homicide detectives were baffled about a murder investigation. I will never forget that. I will never forget that. Murder investigations are tough, because you've got a lot of times you have pressures from outside sources that they want action. The family needs answers. Family members of victims need answers, and you don't want to appear that you're not doing anything, because you're doing the best you can.
You're listening to the ATO Bridging the Divide podcast, brought to you by the Assist the Officer Foundation.
Since 1999, the ATO has given assistance to the first responder community, and now we want to give them a platform to hear their incredible stories.
We also want to hear the stories of the many people that support us.
Our community is small, but it is strong.
We have differences. We don't always agree, and we all make mistakes.
But together we can grow, we can heal.
And we can learn from those mistakes.
And together we can bridge the divide.
The first women in the Dallas Police Department did far more than enter a male-dominated profession. They carried the weight of change on their shoulders and pushed forward anyway. At a time when women were told they did not belong in law enforcement, these pioneers stood firm, enduring doubt, resistance, and isolation to prove that courage and commitment know no gender. Captain Eva Farley shattered expectations in 1896 as the department's first female officer, and her appointment as police captain marked the first recorded time in the nation that a woman achieved that rank, a moment that echoed far beyond Dallas. 1971, Margaret McGee broke another barrier as the first African-American female officer, dedicating 33 years of her life to service and becoming a symbol of perseverance and possibility for generations to come. 1972, Norma and Barbara took a step into uncharted territory as the first women to graduate as patrol division cadets, proving that women could serve on the front lines with strength and skill. Today, we sit with another trailblazer, retired homicide detective Linda Erwin, whose groundbreaking role as the first female detective in Dallas Historic Homicide Unit reflects the same bravery, resilience, and determination. Her story, like those before her, remind us that progress is built by individuals willing to walk alone so others may follow. Linda Erwin, thanks for coming on.
You're welcome.
Thank you for welcoming us to your home. And you're a big part of DPD history, and we're just really excited to be able to document your contribution to the city, to the profession, and especially to the investigative world. And, I have on a co-host, Andrea Isom.
Hello.
She's back on the mic. Kent Wolverton's here.
I'm here.
John Palmer told me a long time ago that I need to have you on the show, and we danced around getting you here for months. So we're here. We're finally here. We're just going to lay out your entire career and life And I think by the time the show's over, I think the listener's going to realize how impactful your career was to so many people, even Detective Isom, our department, moving in a direction, and you really trailblazed. Talk about early life growing up in Dallas. I'm a Dallasite myself. I just want you to, how was life growing up in Dallas for you?
Well, I was born in Dallas, lived all my life in Dallas until 1984. Went to school, all the schools in Dallas. Graduated from Sunset High School in 1964.
Bisons, go Bisons. Yeah.
I was a Bison. It was a good school. I enjoyed it.
It's a little different now.
I'm sure it is.
You know, when I went there in the early 90s, that's when the gangs started really showing up in Dallas, and you were investigating murders then, so you're well aware of that. I have to ask you this just because I'm a John F. Kennedy assassination nut, wanting people that grew up in that era and grew up and lived in Dallas, what they were doing. Do you remember what you were doing that day?
I remember exactly what I was doing. I was a senior. This was in 1963, the fall semester, and we were all told that if we wanted to be off that day, not go to school, to go downtown, see the motorcade, that we would not be counted as absent and get in trouble. So my best friend and I hopped on the city bus, went downtown. So we were downtown, saw the motorcade go by us, and we were probably middle Main and Irving in that area. And then we went on to have lunch.
When it went by, what was the energy like there in downtown? Because I've seen the videos and pictures.
Oh, it was crazy. I mean, a lot of people. And I don't know that, we, little girls, 17 years old, were able to see that much, but we saw motorcade and all the traffic and all the cars go by. It was exciting to us. We went over and had lunch, and while we were at the restaurant having lunch, it's when the news flash came on that the shooting had occurred. So, of course, everyone in the restaurant was just devastated. So, our main thing was to get back home.
And how chaotic was downtown at that point? Like, once you were having lunch, but once the news broke, because it was around, I think, noon is when it happened.
Right. It was. Our main thing was to get back home.
Yeah, and once you did get back home, and at first when the news report came out and Cronkite came on there, it was basically he was shot and he was seriously injured.
Right.
When did you find out, I guess, on the news when you got home?
Right, that's correct. I don't think we knew until each of us got back to our homes that he had died.
No, they kept it pretty quiet. He's down there at Parkland. He watched in the video, and then over all these 60 years of seeing everything, he really was dead when he was shot.
Right.
And then, what was the feel like in the household with that kind of news and happening in our city?
My parents had obviously voted for him, and they like so many other millions of people were, they were devastated that a president of the United States had been murdered in the city of Dallas, where we lived. It was very bad.
I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. Whenever a president is murdered, it's going to affect everything. And then there's also the fear that at the time, because it was at the height of the Cold War. I mean, we were just less than a year away from, or just over a year away from the Cuban Missile Crisis, and we did not know at that time.
Right. You don't know. You don't know where to look.
Yeah. And what else is coming?
Right.
And and I know that we're going to get into the stain that it left on Dallas for a while. We're tabbed the city of hate whenever that happened. Mm-hmm. And you joined the department not long after, 6 years.
Right, as an officer.
I got to ask you. So I want to get into, when did you decide you wanted to get in law enforcement?
Well, when I graduated from high school the following year in 64, I just needed a job.
Right.
And my sister worked for the city of Dallas, and so she said, why don't you just come down the city of Dallas and take the civil service test and see about getting a job? So that's what I did, and I went to work for the police department as a civilian employee.
Okay, where'd you work at?
I think they call it the report division now, but that's where I worked.
Probably records.
Records,
Yeah, right? Yeah, yeah.
They called it the Records Bureau at that time, but that was before the reorganization, and the names of everything got changed.
And where was this located at?
In the basement at 106 South Harwood. I worked at 106 South Harwood my entire 40-year career.
So you're working in records, the Records Bureau, sorry. And how closely did you work with the PD and when you...
Over the years after 1964, I promoted up to different levels in the civilian field. So in 1969, Frank Dyson was the chief of police, and there were probably, I don't remember how many women officers there were, 6 to 8, something like that.
Oh, only that, wow.
And so he decided he wanted to hire more police officers that were women. So he got authorization from the city of Dallas to hire 10 more women officers. And so I thought, well, it'd be a lot more money. And that was my motivation right there. Better job, more money. And so I took the civil service test, like a lot of other women in the city of Dallas, and passed the test, got interviewed, and got hired as one of those 10 women officers.
What was your badge number? Or what is your badge number?
2937.
2937.
Right.
We'll go around the room here. I'm 7482. Kent?
8393.
9272.
Yeah, you got us beat. You got us beat a little bit. Just a little. Wow, so you get hired on and you start the academy. At the time you went to the academy, where was it located?
It was at 2727 Shorecrest.
And that was over by Bachman Lake.
Correct.
Okay. And how long was the academy?
17 weeks.
When you got in there, I got to talk about the culture and of the academy. And I've heard the stories about it was Crusher there. A guy that went by
Childers.
Crusher. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Okay. And
I don't remember him being there at that time. The big guy was W.B. York. I don't know if you're familiar with that name.
No.
Well, he was probably the light crusher.
Tell us about that.
He was just the class advisor. So 9 women went of the 10 that were in my class 112. And I just say that because I remember I said 10 got hired, but 9 went to that class 112. So there we are.
Class 112. So
Wow.
that's amazing. So there was only 6 to 7 women on the entire department in one class. There
right.
was 9.
I think there was. I could be wrong. It may have been 7 or 8, but there were less than 10.
And there was definitely a hiring push. So when you get to the academy, like what do you recall like being one of the toughest things that they did there?
Well, there was not physical fitness stuff like there is now. There just wasn't.
Really?
There was not.
Okay.
Not for anybody. Men, women, there just wasn't.
Were they open to having women on the department at that point, even at the academy?
Well, it was different.
How so?
Of course, there were some people that, what are they doing here? It just wasn't. And women didn't work in patrol back then. So typically, you either went to the youth division was the new name rather than juvenile, and that name had occurred at the reorganization of 68. But there were 9 new women, so what are we going to do with all these 9? So I remember one, Billy Miller, she went to internal affairs, and then one of which was me, went to the personnel division. So we did background investigations on new hires. I can't remember how many of us went to personnel, but some of us did. One went to internal affairs, and the rest of everybody went to juvenile.
So at the time, there was no women in patrol?
No.
That
That did not occur until 72.
Do you recall who the first women that went to patrol?
I do.
Can you tell the listener about who they
It
were?
was Norma Abney. Her name was, I forget what her name was when she came, but it wasn't Abney. And then Barbara Garner.
How big a deal was that?
It was a big deal.
Yeah.
A real big deal.
How did they look at it? Like, I mean, can you describe like how they were treated? And
I think they were treated fine. Mm-hmm. It just was a big deal.
Yeah.
I think that Norma and Barbara, they were fine folks. Everybody treated. I think there's always going to be some people that it doesn't matter. If they're Supergirl. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They're not going to like them no matter what. You know, they're just not.
Okay, you're in personnel. What was that like?
Well, you know, you had to learn to do an investigation, a background investigation
For new recruits coming in.
for new recruits. Uh-huh.
How long did you work there?
It's not something that I aspired to do, you know, forever.
You got placed, yeah.
I transferred over to the general assignments unit for, I don't know, maybe a couple of years later.
Okay.
That is the low end of criminal investigations, you know.
Property crime stuff.
Not exactly property crime, you know, threatening phone calls and things that it doesn't have another place to go. It's general assignments. Forgery is in there, but it's not. General assignments is kind of broken up into sections too, and so all kinds of stuff.
It's called, honestly, it's general investigations now, and under that they have financial crimes, auto theft, and there's a handful of other investigative units in that.
Yeah. Well, auto theft was not part of it. It was his own section back then, but it was kind of a fun thing to do. Destruction of private property, destruction of city property, all kinds of back when I remember the riots that occurred from 1973 where the motorcycles were burned. You know, we did all that.
That was the Santos Rodriguez.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Well, now that you bring that up, what was that like then for the department? Because everybody knew what happened.
Bad business. Just not good.
It was a black eye for DPD. I mean, that was a bad deal.
Of course.
Did you know the officer?
No, I did not.
Okay. Yeah, that's for the community uprising like that, and rightfully so. That was a terrible deal.
Yeah,
and I remember seeing the photos from that, and I would imagine as the department. I mean, there's things happen now in the country and in the profession that it causes it's like igniting a fuse, and I would imagine here in Dallas that's how it was like whenever Santos Rodriguez was murdered in that back seat.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
So you're in general
assignments.
General assignment. Where did you go from there?
So then we had a district attorney's unit back then. I don't know if Dallas still has it now, but it was a rotating assignment. And I don't remember the detective's name that had gone to the district attorney's unit from general assignments, and it was time for him to come back. It was about a year-long assignment or 9 months or something like it. It was time for him to come back. So they said, hey, you want to go down there? And I said, sure, why not? So it was kind of a fun assignment. And I said, yeah, I'll go down there. And so you got a car allowance, and I thought that was kind of neat because you had to go out and find witnesses, you know. And so he came back to general assignments, and I went down there for a year, and it was an invaluable assignment for later when I came back to crimes against persons. Actually, is where I came back to, and because you learned all about how the district attorney's office worked, and I worked with in criminal district court number 2. Under Judge Metcalf, or in his court, with the investigator who worked for the district attorney's office and was assigned to that court. So it kind of worked hand in hand with the DA's investigator getting cases ready for trial. And I thought it was an invaluable experience that helped me later as a Dallas police detective in crimes against persons, because I could see sometimes how cases that were prepped down at the city of Dallas fell short of what was needed when they got to the DA's office.
I went to a unit that's called legal services, and that, what you're describing, is what I did. And it is invaluable because detectives do their work. Right. But there is another arm of the justice will, and it is the prosecutorial side.
Right.
You have to work as a partnership, and you work in that unit. You got a lot of information that a lot of probably seasoned detectives did not know.
Well, the district attorney's unit was part of the legal services division.
Okay. Yeah.
They were assigned, so it kind of worked out of there. I mean, L.D. Montgomery was over that unit, and I can remember, getting what they called, you probably know this, a preliminary prosecution report, and that's all you got. And I'd call down there and say, hey, where's a supplemental prosecution report? Well, what do you mean? Well, I mean the rest of the prosecution report. One page on the front page doesn't get it.
Right.
And these were guys that I later knew and, were friends with,
You only know what you know.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, working in that unit, that is interesting. I'm glad you brought that up because that's a big stepping stone and exposure to a piece of the prosecutorial side that most people don't get.
That's exactly right.
And when I was in legal, I was thinking, man, they always do these career enrichments for these officers, and they let them go and spend X amount of time in a unit to learn something new. I really think that, legal services would be just a hell of a stepping stone and eye opener for people that want to be a detective later on.
That's true. I wouldn't take anything for that year that I spent down at the district attorney's office because, for one thing, I met a lot of judges.
Yeah, of
and
course.
I met a lot of prosecutors that it helped me later.
So, speaking of later.
Later
on, yeah.
So later, when it was time for that assignment to be over, I didn't go back to general assignments. They had an opening in crimes against persons, and so that's where I got sent, and to the assault unit.
Okay. How big was that unit at that time?
Let's see, I think there were two different squads, and there's probably 10, maybe 8 or 10 detectives.
Man.
And it was up in the old homicide and robbery unit on the third floor. I think that
317?
317.
Yeah. We still have that door frame.
Oh, really?
We have the entire door frame of that door. It's in the archives at headquarters. I've got some good photos with it. It's iconic. It really is an iconic door.
Yeah,
and that's a door that you went in many times, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Jack Davis was the captain in Crimes Against Persons when I went in there.
What year was that?
I think it was 74, 75. It was on the side of the hall, where the elevator went up to the jail.
Yes, ma'am.
From the basement to the jail. That was 317, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
that's right.
Yep. That's I love it. I get chills whenever I think about that. It's Crimes Against Person in Dallas PD. We have legendary cases and legendary detectives that worked that floor and went in and out of that door.
Right.
And I'm pushing for that door to be displayed at police headquarters because right now it's sitting in a storage room.
Does it still say homicide and robbery on it?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
I saw it this week. Actually, I got to you'll think I'll show you this picture when we're done. But I have a photo of me holding Captain Fritz's Tommy gun.
Yeah.
It's still there.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We have some treasures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you got there, were you the only female detective in assaults?
No. Michaela Davis was in the assault unit also, and June McLean was a detective. Back in those days, they were transferring the detective rank over to sergeants. You remember that? You know about that?
Yes,
okay.
yes.
They were,
Heard that.
There were a lot of them. The detective was an actual grade, and they were transferring because of the reorganization of '68. They, IACP said, we don't need to have any detective grade people. It's an investigator. And so all those detectives were getting transferred over to sergeants. And so, but anyway, June was one of the detectives in Crimes Against Persons and in the assault unit.
You keep talking about, you mentioned the reorg of '68. Can you just describe that to the listener?
Well, IACP was hired by the city of Dallas to come to Dallas and do a reorganization of the police department, and they did. And during that time, I think they were going around at various other large departments in the U.S., reorganizing them. That's what they did to Dallas. And Frank Dyson was our chief then, and well, actually, it probably was at maybe the close of Charles Batchelor's tenure, I'm not sure, but it was right in that time frame. And so, that's when the names changed of everything. You know, you didn't work in a squad car anymore. You worked in an element. You know, an element. It was called an element. It was big name changes, and you didn't get called detectives anymore. You got called investigators. So it's all kinds of little name changes.
So it was the same thing. It was called something different.
Correct.
I do want to talk about, before we get into going back a little bit, stepping back, your patrol time.
I have never been in patrol.
Never been
Was
in
never,
patrol. Okay.
never was.
That's what I was thinking. You
I
went
wasn't
from,
sure of how like that worked. So I
No,
know you just
but only during the academy, the 4 weeks that you're out there in patrol.
Okay, so you actually part of the academy was you in patrol,
Right.
interesting.
I have never
Like with
heard
a
of that.
trainer, I'm guessing, like with a senior officer.
Yeah.
To train you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
But as far as being assigned to patrol, and I always kind of thought, well, you know, I probably should have said, hey, I want to go to patrol for a while, but I liked what I was doing,
Right.
and so I just never did.
When you got to assaults,
Assaults.
yeah,
So I stayed in assaults until 77, and Don Milliken was a captain of crimes against persons, and so he talked to me about moving over to homicide, and so I said, yeah, I'll do that.
and at that time there was no other females in homicide.
No, there was not.
Through the history of every department, and Dallas is no different. There's always the first time for everything.
Correct.
There always is. And we've talked about extensively on this show, even when Detective Isom's episode about the reputation of Dallas homicide. And it kind of went back to Captain Fritz days. At that time, you say 77?
Mm-hmm.
What was the culture like and the reputation of homicide as you remember?
There were some old-time detectives at that time, in the homicide unit that had worked for Fritz, Captain Fritz. So, you know, they still had the mentality, the way things were done. Not necessarily anything wrong with the way things were done, but they were done a certain way. So those older guys were still around. Now, some of them had moved over to the robbery unit because when Fritz was there, it was homicide and robbery.
That's what the door says.
Right, that's what the door says. And so you didn't necessarily work one or the other, but after the reorganization, it was called crimes against persons. And so you had an assault unit, you had a homicide unit, and you had a robbery unit. So it was not, if a call came in about a homicide, the homicide guys did it. If a call came in about a robbery, the robbery guys did it. Prior to that, any of those persons could do either or. Some of the people who had, the older detectives, a lot of them had kind of moved over to the robbery unit, and then some over to the homicide unit. Mm-hmm. And I know specifically, you know, some were in the homicide unit, and it was tough.
When you got over there, you talk about being tough. I mean, it's harsh reality.
Correct.
And how did that look for you?
Well, I just tried to put my head down and do the job. I mean, if you want to stay, you put your head down and do the job. Because this is what I always thought, supervisors come and go. You can't get mad. I mean, if you want to do the job and say, well, I'm just going to transfer, I don't like this or I don't like that. I mean, that's the way I always thought, because they come and go.
Still true.
Did you feel supported when you first got there?
Pretty much. I mean, there's always a little, there's two squads, two different. I always worked for somebody that was pretty supportive. I did. But, there's little jealousies, between squads. There still is. I'm
Still
sure.
goes on. Yeah.
Was there? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say. So, I'm guessing when you got there, a lot of senior officers there.
Oh,
and
yeah.
In that time period, there was so much that changed with criminal investigations,
Right.
things like the Miranda versus Arizona, like all these things. So
Right.
having to change how you do things throughout that time, were some of the old heads kind of resistant to change, I would imagine?
They had their
or-
own way of doing things.
Yeah.
You don't write anything down. You
Right.
didn't write anything down when you worked for Fritz, because you just didn't write anything down.
Yeah. And then as things progressed and going to court and trial and things
Yeah.
like that, I mean, obviously there's a benefit to writing things down to
Right.
get
Well,
a
it
conviction.
depends on who you were.
Well, sure, yeah.
And, if you didn't recall anything, you didn't recall.
Yes,
I mean, I worked with a guy who never recalled anything.
I've heard some stories about that, some people over the years, but
Right.
yeah. So do you remember the most senior detective when you were there?
I'm sorry?
The most senior detective when you came to Homicide, like how long had they been in Homicide for? Do you remember?
A long time.
I mean, a long time, yeah. I assume so. I was just curious, like, if they stayed 10, 20 years. Now people aren't staying that long, and so I was just curious what the...
They was some of those guys, had been there for a long time. A long time.
Yeah.
Captain Fritz, when did he leave there? Do you remember?
Well, I think he left in, they kind of made him leave maybe in 75 or 74. So I think he wanted to stay there until he had 50 years, as I recall. I could be wrong, but I think he lived across the street at the White Plaza Hotel.
Yeah.
And I could be wrong. I think he left in 75, maybe 74. I don't know, right along in there.
Did you meet him?
I don't know that I ever shook his hand and said, "Hey, I'm Linda Erwin," or my name, back then was not Erwin. But I knew who he was. I don't know if he knew who I was, but I knew who he was.
I imagine, being the only woman in Homicide, he probably knew who you were.
Maybe. I don't know.
Were you aware, obviously you knew you were the only woman, but was it something on the forefront of your mind, or was it always in the background of your mind, or were you just trying to do your job?
I was just trying to do my job. I mean, Don Milliken wanted me over there. He asked me if I wanted to go over there, and I think he wanted a woman. He wanted a woman in Homicide, and so I think I did a pretty good job in the assault unit, because there wasn't a sex assault unit at that time. In the assault unit, you worked any and all kinds of assaults up to anyone dying.
Right.
You worked it didn't matter what kind of assault it was, you worked it. And so I think I did a pretty good job, or he wouldn't have asked me to come over there.
Right.
Move me over there.
That's fascinating. Yeah, now we have all these different types of units for all these different crimes, and y'all worked them all.
Right. We even worked child abuse, because there wasn't a child abuse unit then. So any kind of assault, no matter what kind or who the victim was or anything, the assault unit worked it.
So you give you a well-rounded investigations,
Right.
So many different kinds of cases
Right.
to work and things.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there's a specialty to every type of crime. Even
Right.
child abuse and sex assault,
Right.
and you got this
Right.
regular assault with
Right.
a knife or the gun.
A fist fight,
Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah.
Well, there is now, but then you had to work them all. Like
Right.
that's,
You worked them all.
And that includes like family violence cases. There was was there a family violence unit at the time?
No, what?
Was there a family violence unit?
Oh, no. Anything. Everything.
Assault straight down
Any kind of assault, no matter who the victim was, what the relationship was, it didn't matter.
So you guys were busy, I would imagine. If you're doing everything, it's a lot.
Right.
well, what a way to get experience, to be extremely well-rounded.
Oh, yeah. You got it. You got it all.
What did training look like in Homicide starting off? How'd that look?
You just worked with a guy that, or
Who was a guy?
a guy that'd been there longer than you. And my training officer was Gerald Luther, and he had come from Northwest Patrol. That's where he had come from before he came to Crimes Against Persons. I worked with him for a long time. As a matter of fact, I worked with him in the assault unit, and then at some point in time, he went over to the Homicide, and I also worked with him over in Homicide.
So you knew him beforehand?
Oh, yeah, I knew. Uh-huh.
Okay.
I didn't know him before I went to Crimes Against Persons, but I worked with him two separate units over there.
Do you recall your first case?
I wouldn't have thought I'd have forgotten it, but no, I don't.
Okay.
I remember the first important case that I had.
Tell us about it.
It was a 12-year-old girl named Susie Magis that she was kidnapped out of Denton from a Burger King. It was in September of 1977, so I'd been over there a few months. And she was found in a gravel pit on East Keast 10 days later after she was last seen in Denton. So we got the murder. Dallas got the murder. And it was really tough because for the 10 days prior to her body being found, everybody all over Denton County had been working on the case. The city of Denton, Denton County, the Texas Rangers, the FBI, North Texas State University Police. Everybody, I don't know how many agencies had been working on the case and put out flyers, put out drawings on the news media. It was it's still an unsolved case.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get a case like that where everybody else has had their fingers in it, does that just give you tons more work to do?
I made many trips to Denton. It was a tough case.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because it was a bad case. The medical examiner really could not determine a cause of death other than drowning from the water in the gravel pit. I mean, there was no known cause of death other than drowning. She was still entirely clothed. It was just a bad situation. Nobody saw her leave with anybody, although, any number of people thought, well, maybe this or maybe that. Or she had been in a laundromat with her mother, and her mother had gone to run an errand right quick, and she had asked her, hey, can I walk across the street across the driveway, really, to the Burger King? Her mother said, sure, just make sure you go back over here and, put the clothes in the dryer, from the washer to the dryer. But she never did get back over there. So some kind of way from the Burger King to the laundry, something occurred. And she's 12 years old. She didn't get down to Dallas by herself. So certain things you never forget.
Especially with children.
Isom, have you heard of that case?
Yeah, so looking through cold cases, there's a lot of cases from the 70s and early 80s I see that involve kidnapping or things like that. And the level of brutality that I've seen in the cold cases from the 70s and 80s and even some into the 90s is so much more than what we see today. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them are open, and so we're trying to solve those with DNA and things. But I know there's another case with Elizabeth Barclay in 1979, and it was also a young girl, and it's still open too. And I've seen some of the crime scene photos, and it's, seeing it now is bad, but I mean, I'm sure, seeing things in person and being at the crime scene and seeing things and smelling the smells and seeing the emotions that people have when you tell the next of kin, it's a lot different from looking into a book 40 years later. Right. And so I can imagine like all the cases that were going on at that time and
it seems like there were a lot of kids back then.
There were, yeah.
During those times, there's some years that there were a lot of kids.
But this is pre-Amber Alert. This is pre all those things. And so obviously no cameras, things like that. Right. People were more trusting. Let your kids walk home. Right. So, yeah.
It's true.
Mm-hmm.
You worked a lot of child death?
Yeah.
Those, obviously. I mean, I can see a reaction from you. And just like my wife is actually a child abuse detective now. So she carries a lot of that home, and I hear about it. Mm-hmm. But I know that's something I do not want to mess with. Yeah,
well, we in the homicide unit were glad when those other units were established.
Yeah, that's that make it their specialty, and nobody wants to work that, and thank God that people do, because they need to have justice. Right. Those type of cases are some of the roughest you worked. Can you recall some cases that were unique in some ways, and like some you're most proud of?
There was a guy in the penitentiary in Arizona. I had a double murder that happened in East Dallas. The man and his wife, she was disabled. It was an unsolved case. And this guy, some years after that, this guy was in the penitentiary in Arizona. And he called America's Most Wanted and said, hey, I know something about that case, with a case where this man and woman was killed in Dallas, Texas. And he started talking about it a little bit. So America's Most Wanted contacted us and said, hey, this guy in Arizona at the pen says he knows something about this double murder in Dallas. And so I said, oh, really? And so I found the case file. And so I flew out to Arizona, Florence, Arizona. I think I went to Tucson and drove the rest of the way. But so I go out there and I meet with this guy, and and he knows about it. He obviously knows about it because he's the one that did it. Mm-hmm. He killed this man and woman. And so I got enough out of him while I was there. I got back to got back home and, wrapped him out on a bloody fingerprint. And so it was kind of a unique set of circumstances for him to call America's Most Wanted, acting like he knew something about it and he could tell us who did it when he himself is the one who was involved in the murder.
Was he just wanting some kind of notoriety?
I guess so. I don't know.
Yeah, he was sitting around going, and probably looked at it maybe as like
he wanted to get out of Florence is what he wanted to do. I guess he thought he could come back to Dallas and, be a hero or something. I don't know, or testify or whatever.
It didn't quite work out that well.
No, it didn't. It did not.
So I have a question. One of the things that we teach a lot of the detectives now is for interview and interrogation skills. So what kind of training did you have on interview and interrogation, or what was your favorite method of interviewing? Because it really is like an art form.
I worked with Don Watts.
Okay.
And Don did a lot of in-service training on interrogation. He was a pretty good interrogator. And Jerry King, I worked for Jerry King, and he's a pretty good interrogator too. And Bill Parker. I don't know that I was that great of an interrogator, but I was a good interviewer. Or I say I was. Other people thought I was. But I worked with Virgil Sparks for a number of years. And Sparky didn't, he liked to get, in the middle of the scene investigation and everything. He didn't necessarily like to talk to people, witnesses or anything like that.
He liked the evidence portion.
He wanted to get in there, do the scene investigation. So we worked together for years, and so when we went out to scene, I usually did this stuff, and he did this stuff, and then we correlated it all together.
Sure.
But a lot of it you just pick up and you do what works.
Right.
Some people, and you know this yourself, it doesn't matter what or how you talk to them, you are not going to get anything from them.
Right.
Because they are stone cold psychopaths.
Yes.
Don and I worked these cases. There was 12 murders committed by one guy, mostly in Oak Cliff. I'm trying to remember when this happened. They were all assigned to different people. Nobody really realized that they were all
they
committed
didn't know they
by
were
the same
connected
person.
initially.
It
was a serial, but they didn't quite know it.
And finally, the ballistics guy out at the Swifts, started saying, "Hey, this looks like this is all by the same gun." But anyway, so they gathered them all up and said, "Okay, I think this is when we were in the cold case unit." So Don and I put it all together. But that guy had no soul. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He had no soul. When you looked in his eyes, there was nothing there. Have you remember the shark movie, where the shark come up out of the water?
Jaws?
Jaws.
Yeah.
Jaws.
Yeah.
Jaws. That's her. Jaws. And you saw that shark. There was nothing in that mechanical shark's eye.
Just dead eyes.
That is exactly the way that guy was. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
He had no soul in his eyes, because I talked to him for a good while, and there's some people there's just nothing there.
Yeah. Do you think that as a female, sometimes you can interrogate a suspect and get more than a male might, just in the sense of the maternal, it's talking to mom sometimes?
Maybe, but then sometimes not.
Sure. Sometimes you have people who are very much they have a problem with women.
I was talking to this guy one time. He was like 17, big guy. And he and several other guys, there's a bunch of robbery, murders, I don't know, 3 or 4, something. The same bunch, though, that were doing them. And this kid was sitting there in the interrogation room, and his knees were shaking, his jaw was shaking, and he was in tears. He said, "My grandma," he said, "I want you to know, my grandma raised me better than this." And it was a typical thing where he knew that his grandmother would be so ashamed that he had gotten involved with a group of people and gotten himself in such a jam, and that his life was going down the tubes. He knew it.
Yeah.
And he was just ashamed. And I don't know if he saw me as somebody like she knows. He just was in tears. He spilled the beans,
Yeah.
But he just was ashamed. He just was ashamed. He said, "My grandmother would be so ashamed of me." And it's just flat. And he probably wasn't that bad a guy.
Right.
He just got involved with the wrong bunch.
Totally on the opposite end of the one with the dead eyes.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that type
yeah,
of person.
of course.
And, you know, you're doing this job, and you've worked. I mean, I don't even want to ask you how many murders you've actually worked.
Oh, a bunch.
A bunch, yeah.
I still have up in the attic. I still have all my books,
Case list, yeah.
all my lists.
That's I mean, I would love to see that. I want to talk about. You remember Charles Albright?
Yes, I do.
The Texas eyeball killer. Mm-hmm. So it made me think of you were talking about the one guy that did 12 that you know of. I mean, some of these serials, you can only get them on X amount, but you don't know how many truly they actually were involved with.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in that time frame when she was
yeah.
working, because this is all digital evidence, and you can't tie them to locations, with technology. And so who knows what was going on back in the 70s and 80s and 90s.
I didn't work that Albright case, but I knew about it.
Albright, that was a big deal. I read the book. It's a fascinating case of what he was doing. He just passed away a couple of years ago. So can you talk about any other? I want to get into the technology. Isom keeps talking about the advances in technology and how that affected investigations like that you worked.
Up in the late 80s, it started helping us a lot. Prior to that, we just didn't have it. We didn't have it. We had fingerprints was a big thing, DNA come into being, that was tremendous. But by then, I was probably getting ready to retire when it started getting big. But I will say that DNA evidence it's really I don't know how it impacts y'all now. I guess it's really big.
It is. I think it's something that actually a lot of our detectives have gone away from as much because there's so much technology. We're almost too reliant on video surveillance and cell phone records. Right. Whereas, like, now that I've seen some case files, we really have to marry the two together and make sure that we're taking care of our physical evidence as well.
Right.
Because, physical evidence doesn't lie. DNA doesn't lie. Right. So I can't imagine how you all worked cases without all of these tools, but you did. It's amazing.
Well, they say we used to have to rely a whole lot on eyewitness testimony, and that's been, that was always a big deal in trials. And so, well, how do you know, or how can, people get up on a witness stand and lie. Right. Say, well, I saw him do it, when they didn't, So physical evidence is still the mainstay.
Can you recall, or in your opinion, what was the single most greatest tool in the technology advancement that helped homicides?
Fingerprints a big deal, but DNA is too.
Now there's so many videos out there of everywhere.
Video is big, and there's cameras everywhere. I didn't realize, and so you see, you read books or whatever, that there's so many cameras on streets, street corners. I guess that's a big thing.
It's a huge thing now, and within schools, businesses, Ring cameras on
mobile cameras that the police department puts where they want. It's crazy the amount of technology that you guys have to filter through just to
see. I didn't realize that until probably not too long ago.
I mean, it's license plate, camera readers, cell phone records, social media. So even just having our phones out right now, because we have things open in the background on our phones, it's amazing, but it is a lot to sort through. And then you have a 5 or 6 suspect case. You have to do 5 or 6 people's warrants for all of them. And so it's not unheard of to have 40 or 50 search warrants on one case. And then you get 12 of those a year, plus your suicides, your unexplains. It can be busy. Busy.
Now you're expected to do it, right? So the defense will beat you up if you don't.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Is there one case that sticks with you that you had a great idea of who the suspect was, but you just could not get it across the goal line?
Well, I've come across a few of your case files, and I have some that I want to talk to you about offline, because I have one that I'm pretty close, I think, on.
I can remember one time I was pretty positive I knew who did something, and the guy, basically thumbed his nose, and said, when you got a case, file it. That's what he said. And I said, well, I will. But unfortunately, 2 or 3 people that were involved or not involved, but on the fringes maybe, of the case. They met an untimely death, in other matters, and so, it did come to fruition with him anyway. But I got it solved.
John Palmer talked about whenever you start in Navarro too. Kevin Navarro talked about this when you were able to go and watch the interviews, and he actually learned so much by watching other detectives do interviews and pick up pieces and basically kind of mimic what they do. I want to try that technique. Did you see that as well?
I did. I had a case where sometimes you work with somebody and you kind of have different opinions about what has happened or whatever. I had a case where a school teacher was murdered in her home over off Peavy Road, around Loop 12 in Ferguson, in that area over there. And my partner, her husband had left home like 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the morning to go to work, and she didn't show up at school, teacher class, and so her some of her coworkers, she always came to work, so they came out. A couple of them came out to see why she didn't come to work, and I think they could look through a window or something, and they saw her laying on the floor. Call the police. The police get out there. Well, she's dead. She's been murdered in the home. And so my partner thought that, you always look at the husband or the boyfriend first. That's who you look at. So he thought, he had was involved and left conveniently to go to work. And then I remember that we were kind of at odds because there was an alley that went down right behind their house with a bunch of apartments backed up to that alley. And for some reason, I could see in my mind's eye that it would be possible for someone to see him leave and think, the house was dark. That I don't know why, I just, see him leave and then try to get in the house. That's exactly what it was. Somebody, the suspect, had gone in their dog door, gone in the house. He didn't realize there was anybody in the house. And so he confronted her. She was in the shower. When she came out of the shower, she heard him scrambling around in the house. And so she went for the gun that was in the bedroom. So they tussled over the gun, and he shot and killed her. Anyway, he burgled the house, stole some stuff, stole some of her jewelry. So, of course, we didn't know this. A few weeks later, I got a call one Saturday from a guy in jail, and he said, "Hey, I know who killed that school teacher." The guy was in jail. He said, "I know who's killed that school teacher." And I said, so I went and got him out of jail, brought him down to the office. And so he told me a name. He wasn't pronouncing it exactly right, but I found the guy, and he was in jail. So I go down there. He said the guy who had called me said he's got some of the property. He's still got some of the property, and he's in jail. So I go down there and check his property, and sure enough, he's got a gold bracelet or a couple of pieces of property in his jail property that belonged to my victim. And so anyway, we got that property and wrapped him out on fingerprints too in the house, out of the house. And it was a bad case, a really, really bad case. That's another one that sticks out in my mind. But initially, I guess my point was Sparky and I we were kind of at odds a little bit, because that kind of thing would have happened, could have happened, might have happened another day, another time. It didn't happen that time. And that's exactly how that guy went in. He went in through the dog door.
Was there a lot of collaboration among detectives when you have a new case? I mean, what we do now a lot, we'll come back to the office and we call it cutting it up. We'll put things on the board and we'll kind of discuss it and sometimes argue about you're wrong and I'm right.
Yeah, sometimes a little bit.
Yeah.
Sparky and I, we kind of argued about that. And of course, he realized he was wrong later.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody likes to hear that. We did an episode a few back about the Ioni's nightclub murder where six people were killed. Yeah. Did you assist in that, or
a little bit about that? We wanted to divide those murders up. You can have two, and you can have two, and you can have two. Instead of one guy getting all six of them.
No, that was a interesting case, and it still to this day is the largest loss of life in one incident. It's as
And it changed the penal code for Texas
and it
for
made
capital
it a
murder.
capital offense. I really enjoyed doing that episode because it brought me back to a time that I grew up in Dallas in the '80s, and then it was a historic case, and not just for Dallas but for the whole state. It was fascinating.
I'd forgotten all about that one, but I do remember it. Yeah.
No, it's really
It was on
interesting.
Inwood, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was up there. I can't remember the exact address.
Inwood and Lemon in that area?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Man, he went in and he's kind of a loser. Shouldn't have been over here in that country anyway. He came over here on a false visa, and his visa had expired, and he was a convicted felon. There's a lot of things that he slipped through the cracks, and he got over here and he did that.
Right.
So, interesting case. I do want to talk about another interesting case that you were involved with, and I watched the Confession Killers documentary.
Yeah.
And
Henry
Lee Lucas. Can you tell us about that?
Henry Lucas killed a lady named Kate Rich up in Ringgold, Texas. And he had been traveling around. I don't know how he made his way to Texas, but he did, with his 15-year-old girlfriend named Becky Powell. Some kind of way they were doing some work for her, or staying at her place or something up in North Texas, up in the Panhandle. I don't know much about the murder, but he had murdered her. And so the Texas Ranger up in that area, investigating her death, knew that he was involved. And he left the area, as I recall. And then when he came back through, he'd gotten in some kind of disturbance with Becky, his girlfriend. He killed her, too. Anyway, he got arrested up around Decatur. And so the Texas Ranger up there had him in jail and was filing charges on him in Miss Rich's case. He started talking about other murders of other women, and so the number just kept increasing. The Texas Ranger put out information by teletype to other agencies, and just as a matter of professional courtesy, you might want to check and see if you got any murders that this guy was involved in. So that's how we got involved. But the sheriff down around Georgetown had some unsolved murders, and the Texas Rangers created a task force, and so the numbers just kept multiplying. I think it got up close to 900 that he was involved in. And
so he says.
So they had a little conference down there in Austin. I went down there to it. They disseminated some information. So a lot of agencies were down there to hear about him, and I went down to talk to him in Georgetown to see if he might have committed any murders in the city of Dallas. I did not think that he did. I did not believe anything that he said. I just did not. He knew nothing about any unsolved murders that I questioned him about. I didn't show him any pictures or show him any crime scene pictures or any victim pictures. He just didn't know anything. And I still have sketches of women that he drew their little sketches of this is one that I killed and this is another one that I killed, and they're just little cartoonish like sketches. I didn't believe that he was responsible for killing anybody in the city of Dallas, and I talked to him numerous times, drove around all around the city of Dallas, with him pointing out this place or that place, or did not believe that he was involved in anything in the city of Dallas. And I told my supervisors that I didn't think he was good for anything in Dallas. But there was some other talk about, he says that he was. He says that he killed some people in Dallas. So I guess you're wanting to know about the fake case.
I am.
So anyway, they wanted me to put together some kind of little fake case, make up a file, an offense report, and I didn't really feel more comfortable about doing that. But they felt like that we had to know for sure, and so I put together a murder file and went to talk to him one more time out in Garland. at the DPS office. He admitted that he killed this woman who
It was fictitious.
was fictitious. The whole thing was fictitious. That he gave a voluntary statement that he committed this murder that was not a murder. And so after he did that, we just didn't have anything else to do with him.
He kind of confirmed what you already knew and
Right,
suspected.
he did. He did.
You know, I saw your episode on that in that documentary, and that was so interesting that other people were so quick to want to solve cases and clear off, draw the line through that case, that they were just going on whatever he said. And Andrew, you turned me on to that show.
Yeah, it's so mind-blowing, I think, to put all the pieces together, and that was the conclusion that so many people had. But I think it's a really good example of strategic interview skills about holding back pieces of evidence, not asking leading questions, because that's how you get false confessions, but also that's how you get witnesses say, you know, my boyfriend told me he did this, because you just laid out the whole case, and that's how you prevent putting the wrong people in jail. And so I can't imagine showing a case file to a suspect and asking him questions that he just, you know what I mean? Like you really have to protect your case and protect the details, because at the end of the day, it's your name on that file.
That's exactly
for forever.
Right. That's right.
And you know, so
Well, it was a stroke of genius, though, to get that out there. And I know that it was uncomfortable and nobody wanted to have to do that, but to confirm what you suspected that.
but it sounds like it was needed to.
You know, there are a lot of murder investigations are tough, you know, because you've got a lot of times you have pressures from outside sources that they want action. The family needs answers. Family members of victims need answers, and you don't want to appear that you're not doing anything, because you're doing the best you can. I remember one time we had a deputy chief over crimes against persons. I don't know how it got in the news media, because I know we didn't say it. But some kind of way it got in print media that homicide detectives were baffled over this homicide. And our deputy chief came unglued. He came unglued. And he came down the hall, and he said he better not ever hear again that his homicide detectives were baffled about a murder investigation. I will never forget that. I will never forget that. He didn't want us to be baffled about anything.
But that was actually just the news. It was a word.
Yes,
It was just a word.
Of course. You know, the news media likes to throw those little words out there, because it's exciting.
It's a triggering. And
It's a
it triggered him.
word. Absolutely, it triggered him. That's exactly
It's
right.
the headline. Even back then, I mean,
Yeah.
you look at these old newspaper reports and things, and murder. I mean, there's TV shows about it now, and it's always been something that the public is fascinated with,
Right, of
good or
course.
bad. And so, like the headlines back then, and they would release details that blows my mind. I'm like, why would they release those details?
Right.
But because the public just wants that information so much,
And they want a name. See, they
Right.
want a name attached to it. There was a reporter who would say, well, just how many times was he shot? Well, multiple times. Well, how many?
you don't
Well,
need to know
multiple
that.
times. Well, just how many? Well, what difference does it make if it was 6 times or multiple times? Because 6 times sounds worse.
There's an agenda.
Right.
They have an agenda. You have an agenda to protect the integrity of a case and solve a murder. They have an agenda to be the first to get information out there.
Correct.
And even sometimes stretch what
Right.
the truth is.
And you hit on a good point with, there's so much pressure. And so people always say, like, homicide. A lot of people don't want to do homicide because they're like, it's a lot of work. I'm like, well, yeah, that's kind of the point. It's a lot of work, and there's so much pressure, and the hours are crazy, and there's a lot that goes into it. So for you doing it for such a long time, how did that affect your personal life, especially as a woman? I feel like, I don't know if were you married when you joined homicide or not
Yeah.
yet? You were. So
I worked in the yard a lot.
Yeah.
Get out and planted flowers, mowed the yard. That was my getting away from
How you
things. It
de-stressed.
cleared my mind. It's a funny aside. My husband, he did the tractor work, but I did the flowers and stuff. But he would say, he didn't, care that much about it. I'd go down to Rubel's downtown, drag in flowers, 2 or 3 times a year and plant them. And he got to where he would say, okay, it's about time to go get them flowers, And I'd say, well, are you going to help me plant them? Oh, no, but I'll bring you Dr. Pepper out here. And so it was just kind of a joke between us. But I worked in the yard a lot because, and it might sound crazy, but it just, it helped me clear my mind of all the ugliness of people and of the world. And I made up my mind at the very beginning, that you can't win them all. And by that I meant you can't solve them all, which it didn't mean that you don't try. I didn't mean that. I don't mean that. But you can't make yourself crazy trying to solve things and do it the wrong way. And so you got to get out and plant a few flowers.
Well, connecting with nature and getting out in the sun and getting your hands in the dirt. I mean, I think that all of us could use more of that, as opposed to nowadays people bury themselves in their phone. No, that was your way of dealing.
Way.
Yeah, that was your way of dealing with it and coping. And I've talked to a lot of detectives, including Detective Isom here, about some of the hardest parts of the job. And, I could see a reaction from you. We were talking about the child murder. Dealing with grief of others is a lot to carry.
Well, I tell you, suicides, you probably know this, are tough.
Sometimes harder than murders, I think.
Right. And I used to have, working deaths, no matter if they're murder cases or suicides or whatever, accidents, it doesn't matter. A death is a death is a death. And you kind of get callous a little bit. You don't mean to, but sometimes you do. But I used to have people call me, particularly on suicides, like on an anniversary date. They just wanted to talk. They just, are you sure? Are you sure it was a suicide? And I'd talk or I'd listen. But sometimes you have to walk in somebody else's shoes. And the reason I say that is my very own son committed suicide in 1998. And I tell you what, sometimes when you walk in somebody else's shoes, it's a whole new thing. It really is. It's a whole new thing. And I've been working death cases for a long time by then, a long time. And there wasn't any question. There wasn't any question about it. It's just that when you walk in other people's shoes, you think you know. You think you know. You think you know everything about it because you've been doing it for a long, long time. But you have a greater understanding about that slippery slope that sometimes people can, when they just think there's nowhere else to go, there's nothing else to do, it's not going to get any better. I'm just saying, you have a better understanding. You have a better understanding with some people's thought processes. You know what I mean?
It makes you look at through a different lens
of
and
course.
give them more grace, understanding.
Yeah. Of course. That's all I'll say about that. Yeah. Death cases is, doesn't matter really what kind it is. Death is a death.
So I've been working on cold cases, obviously, the last year or so, and I've seen your name in a lot of those.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so it's fascinating to me to look at contemporary cases and then going back in some of the open ones. And the big thing that we're seeing is the DNA and the genetic genealogy, which is just a fascinating movement in investigations. So I'm just curious about how you gravitated towards cold case unit. Obviously you did a lot of time with crazy hours and crazy cases and a lot of stress, courtroom. There's a lot for a homicide. So can you just talk about why you went to cold case and what did you get out of a cold case? Like, did you find it interesting to go back on someone's case years later from a different perspective?
Yeah, they talk about a different set of eyes.
Sure.
Fresh set of eyes. Sometimes you'll see something different. But I don't know that that's necessarily. It kind of worried me because I thought, well, I hope this detective doesn't think that I'm going to,
right,
mess around, in their file, whatever. But you really can't really think like that, because sometimes you do see something that maybe somebody missed, or when you look at something, 8 or 10 years or 15 years or whatever. People change. Witnesses change.
Right.
you may have there might have been a witness that saw something 10 years ago. Now they're in the penitentiary and they want to decide they want to tell the right thing. So there's all kinds of reasons that somebody will come up with the right information. Don and I traveled all over Texas to the TDC facilities, working cold cases. Have you done that?
Not a lot yet. We're mostly doing DNA, but yeah, I know there's a lot to that.
If you haven't already, and you may have, so if I'm stepping on a toe here, tell me. Get in touch with the internal affairs people. Okay. Have you done that? Mm-mm. Internal affairs people, TDC, and they will help you tremendously.
Okay.
When you start going to TDC facilities, because they can get you set up your interviews where you don't have to talk through bars, and it's just a whole lot easier.
Yeah. The fear about cold case is like, well, what if I didn't do something right? But I think having detectives who've done the cases, like being in homicide before and then switching over to cold case, you and I have an understanding that sometimes the detective is working the case really hard and then a new case comes in or something.
Right.
It doesn't mean that the detective did a bad job.
Right.
Like you said, witnesses change, technology evolves.
Right.
And that's why the statute of limitations is forever, because we want to get it right. And if it takes as long as it takes, we want to solve it as soon as we can. But we arrested somebody recently from a 43-year-old cold case. He's still alive. So it wasn't ideal that he lived his life free for so many years, but we were still able to close it just because of technology changing.
Right.
So
a lot of times too on a cold case, it might not be necessarily that it results in an arrest, but you resolved an issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I always, if somebody's going to get mad, a coworker or whatever, because you came up and cleared a case, if they didn't clear, there might be any number of reasons that happens.
Sure.
They need to get over it.
Yeah.
For different perspectives. I mean, you all four of us could sit here and look at something, and we might see different things.
Right.
And that's okay.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, you might clear something that I missed.
Well, and that's what I've seen is that, there's so many case files. I mean, over 10,000 in the archives, and there's so many different styles of investigation and documentation. But at the end of the day, everyone's trying to do the right thing, and we're doing the best that we can under the circumstances. I know in the 90s, the Jamaicans, it was 500 murders a year. So, like, I can't imagine how you all juggled so many murders. It's just fascinating.
We had so many murders one year, 501.
Right.
I mean, you could hardly even get your notes written before you having to go answer another call. Yeah.
I mean, and trying to have a personal life and all those things at the same time.
Yeah,
I mean, I can't even.
You just live at the office.
Yeah.
You just have a cot at the.
It was inundated. Well, just like the Angela Samota case, that particular night, Rick Silva and I, he died a year or so ago. He was my partner. We got called out on one case. And then we were still on that call. We got another call, so he went and got that one. And then we got called on another call, which was the Angela Samota case. So I called Sparky and I said, "Hey, you got to come help us because we got 3 murders tonight." And so he hated me from then on. Because it was an unsolved case.
Right.
Well, he didn't hate me. He just. And so we were so glad when Linda. Got that case solved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just, I think there's so much that goes into it, and there's so many hours and so much work, but you have to love it to stay in it for 24 years. It has to be something in your personality about, how curious and you want to get to the answer. It's solving the puzzle. And so I think it takes a certain kind of person to investigate homicide and then to stick with it for so long, because obviously you wouldn't stay if you didn't like it, so I think that's just incredible to see what you've done, especially for those of us now, especially for the women on the department, because it's amazing what you've done.
I enjoyed working homicide. I really did.
Yeah.
Every career has an end.
Yeah.
You decided to retire. How did that go for you? Did you know that it was time?
I knew I was going to retire after 5 years and drop. And my husband had retired in 95. So he retired 6 years before I did. They talked him into working for the sheriff's department.
So was your husband an officer?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, I didn't know.
Dick Erwin.
Okay.
He was a motorcycle
Oh,
officer
okay,
in Dallas.
okay.
Anyway, so he knew the sheriff down here, so they talked him into coming to work down here, and so he did that for about 3 years.
Was it hard to walk away from DPD?
No.
You had done your time.
Yeah, because everybody moved down to the new building. You know, I think that the move to the new building occurred within like a month or two after I retired.
Okay.
So it was like, I don't know how to describe it. It was like the chapter closed or the book closed or something.
Well, the old Dallas headquarters, it is iconic and historic. Even going into it now, I mean, like I said, I did my physical agility test in that basement where Oswald was shot, and it's still magical in some way. And then it's a beautiful building.
Well, I haven't been there since it's North Texas Law School.
The outside still looks the same.
Right,
It's
right.
just the inside has changed up, and now the municipal courthouse is over there in there too.
There's something to be said, though, I think, for having a career and leaving everything on the table. Because if you work your career right and you go after the things you want to do, whether it's SWAT, whether it's homicide, whatever it is, then when you do walk away, you're not wondering what if. Like, I always wanted to work that. I always wanted to do this. And so if you go after your career from the beginning and work your way up and earn your stripes and do what you need to do, then I think it's like you, like that's what I hope to have when I'm done, is like at peace with it, because I've done the things I've wanted, I've had the great stories, and now it's, you know, time for a new chapter, a new story. So I think that's great.
It was a good career, and when I retired, I did a lot of traveling. I've been to Europe 7 or 8 times, and I've had a good life. I miss my husband.
You really did pave the way for someone like me to come on the department, and this was my dream for DPD, is to be in homicide. So I look to you as definitely the one who did blaze the trail. So my question to you, I guess, would be, looking back so many years in the department and so much of it in homicide, and now that you've been gone for so many years, what is, I guess, the legacy that you hope that you left behind, and what do you use your wish for future detectives who want to take up the torch of what you left behind?
I think you've picked it up really, really well. I really do.
I'm trying, but
well, no, I do.
in general, for all the others who are coming.
You know, just keep your head above the water. Just keep on. Just keep on. You'll do good.
Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Down when you're lonely, I'll pull you up. Life leaves you heavy when the going gets tough. I'll be your shoulder, together we'll run up from the bottom, yeah, we'll rise above. Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. I'll never give up on you. Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. how far for the gold and the blue. I will never give up on you.